We are speaking about 360-degree leadership, specifically pertaining to the role of the worship leader. And we're going to start the conversation about the importance of the relationship between a campus pastor and a worship leader. Talk to me, guys. We have the privilege of having two campus pastors with us and also a worship leader that have been serving many years with many different campus pastors. So speak to me, the importance of that relationship.
Maybe I should, like Bill Clinton, say I can neither confirm nor deny anything that we're going to say now.
No names involved.
No names involved. There's a lot of stuff that we can share, but I think the important thing is I think most campus pastors or campus leaders would want to protect the chemistry of that relationship that they have with their worship pastor. And that's probably the greatest challenge to every campus leader. Understanding how a creative person functions and what they need to be empowered and nurturing that relationship. So I take my hat off to every campus pastor I've ever worked under. Some of them got that right brilliantly. Some of them it was more of a struggle, but they came through it very well.
Yeah, I think most of the times, I won't generalize, but most of the times, creative people are feelers.
No way.
And I don't like what you're saying. I was
You're
feeling
offended.
And then the campus pastor type of leader, they're more like thinkers, I think. And I think it's so important that those two worlds, find each other and understand each other. So obviously there's a lot of investment that can go into that. And I think it's a relationship you have to intentionally work on. Understanding that we're not the same, but if we have chemistry, we can go very far.
If we have to use the biblical terms of the apostolic and the prophetic and the beautiful, beautiful relationship between those two. What would you guys say? What are helpful when it comes to that?
I think, Eugene, you're going to Ephesians 2, if I remember correctly, where Paul says the church is built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets with Christ as the cornerstone. So the apostolic and the prophetic seem to be two of the most important role players. And I think in our Doxa Deo context, we've gravitated to talking about the apostolic leadership gifting, the strategic acumen that is very often found in your campus pastor. And then the prophetic, the in the moment, the sometimes being accused of being so heavenly minded that you're really no earthly good, the prophetic side of that ministry. But it's important to notice that he puts that in the context of the body. So those two roles are important to move the body forward. And in my limited imagination, I see the body and I see these two legs that are responsible for carrying the weight of the body and also moving the body either forward or in whatever direction. So the combination of the actions of these two legs, the left leg and the right leg in a sense, is for me like the picture for the apostolic and the prophetic. And these two legs never work together. Like that, the jump thing doesn't work. The best way to move is like one moves ahead while the other one stays and stabilizes the body. But then that one needs to pick up and go beyond where this one is standing to take in new ground in that sense. So the almost like the tandem working of the apostolic and the prophetic is like these two legs taking the entire body forward step by step.
Sure. Yeah, and I think when it comes to that relationship, I mean, you guys are now in that position of leadership where you lead a campus. What would you say when you think about the worship leader that works with you in that tandem relationship? What would you say is things that help that relationship?
Oh, I'm listening very closely now.
I have to think carefully now. I think it's a crucial question, Eugene, because I'm thinking of all the unfair things that a worship leader and a campus leader has to process in order to have that relationship. So when I was a worship leader full time, I'm influenced in a lot of ways by other churches and what they do, the media, peers, the expectation that you feel from people, strong-willed people that you lead. I mean, you don't lead people who got saved last year. You walk sometimes into space and people are double your age with so much experience, and there's a lot of pressure, and that builds a picture. And I think a sense of responsibility, even if nobody communicates that to you. Then the campus leaders got the expectation and the weight, that mantle, that apostolic mantle, to make everything work, of which worship is one of them.
Yeah.
And also have the expectation of people that things should happen in a way. And many times the campus leader has got no way to execute the worship. He can't play all the instruments and make it happen. But he's absolutely responsible for whatever people experience in that worship time.
Yeah.
And if you are a control freak leader or like to control things and you can't, it makes that leader vulnerable because you are responsible for this. So I think the forces at work for everybody to fill their roles are extremely complex.
Yeah.
And for that relationship to work, the conversation between worship leader and campus leader must be more than conversations they have with other forces.
Yes,
I think
agree.
that interaction between two people where ideas are shared, where vision is communicated, one amongst many things that has to happen. But I think there's no way that anyone can assume that what you aim for is what the other person wants unless we speak about it. I remember when I started in a previous campus, I came off the stage and I thought, we were almost there where I thought we should go. 5 more minutes and everybody would have loved us. The campus leader at that time came to me afterwards and said, man, we used a lot of time. I mean, you almost reached 20 minutes. And I was going, what happened here? I wanted to say sorry that we cut it short. He said, guys, you went way over.
Sure.
And I realized in that moment,
Yeah.
what I think should happen in the worship time and what he thinks were worlds apart.
Different.
Because we never spoke about it.
About it, yeah.
So I think one of many, and we'll go to many of them, but I think that one is, if there are no intentional interaction where the worship leader says, where the prophetic says to the apostolic, what do you have on your heart? What do you have on your mind? And that happens intentionally, regularly. No other approach or fix to that relationship can happen unless that's in place.
Yeah, I remember when I started out in ministry, I was only 22 years old.
You look 22.
Thank you, Eugene. And
like 3
it
years
was
ago.
my first church where I ministered wasn't Doxa Deo, it was another church. And I remember that the pastor expected me to be at his house on a Saturday evening at 8 o'clock. And then we talked about the Sunday and we prayed together. He would even sometimes ask me to go to the piano. And then the two of us worshipped together. Now I was young and I was ignorant, so I remember there were many times that I was a little bit like, really? And why only me? Where's the rest of the team? And only years later, I understood that because I started to understand the weight and the responsibility on the apostolic and the prophetic. So it's such a crucial relationship.
What would you guys say as campus leaders? What do you want from a worship leader? What do you expect of a worship leader?
You ask difficult questions.
Yeah, I would love to know that.
Yeah, I think I would like a worship leader to express. I think first we have to. I want to, with my worship leader, I first want to, like I've already said, spend time with my worship leader to download.
Yeah.
And then from there, like you've said, Tops, most of the times the campus pastor cannot play the instruments, cannot lead the worship, he cannot lead the creative team. So I would love my worship leader to take that which we have agreed upon and go and give expression to that. Make it a reality, if I can put it that way. So that is a big expectation, I know.
When you talk about that which we have agreed upon,
Yes.
obviously you're gravitating to the whole thing of vision and values.
Yes.
The important thing of vision, we're moving in the same direction.
Yes,
We may have different legs, but we're
Yeah.
definitely moving
Moving
together
in the same direction.
in the same
yeah.
direction. And in terms of values, we value certain things on the way there.
Yes.
What you value and what I value needs to be the same thing.
We see the same picture.
Yeah,
we see the same outcome, or have the same outcome.
Right, in mind, yes. Yeah.
I think there's a measure of humility from both sides that works the magic better in creating the expectation. Because if we generalize, like you said, and the one is the thinker and the one is the feeler, it comes with a lot of passion and conviction. If a campus leader is carrying a specific vision, it's his or her responsibility to very strongly direct where the whole place is going.
Right.
When there's not enough interaction, or even when there is, and there's a very strong conviction of some expression or how we're going to aid that direction, or even sometimes running parallel to that, it's very tough to submit that from a worship leader to the campus leader if the relationship isn't strong enough. Because I think that's where the competition sometimes is felt. But the prophetic, I really heard from God. So how can you as a leader say to me, we're not going to do it this Sunday? We wrote the song and it was a moment of glory, and the
You're
power
excited
fell.
about it.
So I think it's very tough to maintain a relationship if the connection and the understanding of roles are not so well understood. And so on your question, what do I expect, having been a worship leader, now being a campus leader, is if whatever worship leader in that moment comes to a campus leader or then to me to say, I've got a very strong idea, to submit the idea.
Yeah.
And not to come and say, so God has said.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most beautiful things that I've seen, where it is never your personal revelation, aha, glory moment is never bigger than the person carrying that mantle, which is the campus leader.
Yeah.
And I think if every worship leader is so secure in their own identity that whatever happens to their idea, their song, their whatever drama, is not a bigger value than whatever the campus leader feels has to do.
Sure.
I've seen that the moment a worship leader submits it, it's a much easier conversation for a campus leader to go. The fact that you honor the apostolic leadership in this makes me want to make that a possibility.
Yeah.
But the moment it comes like, we are going to do this thing, it becomes very hard. I was in a moment in a previous campus where in a meeting, the campus leader said, you guys are running with this production, which we did. And the full-time team wasn't involved at all. He said, and it feels like we're not doing anything. Yeah. You were doing your thing over there. I said in that meeting, but I thought it's a victory. We get so many partners in church members. Isn't that what we wanted to do? So I wasn't saying, oh, sorry. I was like, what's the problem here? No, because we have to raise teams and get them involved so that you guys don't have to do it. But me justifying myself didn't help the relationship. It actually caused it to get through difficult waters, because now it's like, okay, so you are doing something and in a way communicating, we know what we're doing, stay out of our way. Very conducive to a very bad relationship, you know. So I learned from that lesson, and in that moment there was different expectations on how we as a team do it together, because we didn't spend enough time on that matter.
Yeah. And I think, Tops, you have touched a little bit on the honoring thing. I think we need more of that, because honoring is like a kingdom principle. It's like a key, and I believe it unlocks life for in terms of atmospheres. It brings life. It breathes life into relationships and
gives covering and protection
and environments and so on. So honoring is so important. And I've heard many worship leaders that said, in this difficult situation, I really struggle to give respect to my leader, because I feel he doesn't deserve it, because he's in the wrong. And I've learned that there's a big difference between respect and honoring.
Yes.
Respect is earned, but honoring is due. Is just given.
Yes.
God has honored us when we didn't deserve it or earned it even. And so it's so important to understand that if I think it's Romans 13 that says we have to obey authority, honor authority. And I think it's just the chapter before that, Romans 12, that says, leave the judgment.
Yeah.
You use the key.
Yeah.
Just use the key. Just use the honoring key.
Right.
That will bring life. That will unlock. That will bring heaven down to earth. So don't try to take the seat for judgment or whatever you want to call it. Taking control and say, okay, but in this situation, I'm not now going to resist. That's not your place. It's not your place. You are called to honor.
So let's speak a bit about that. I mean, if we're really honest with one another, that relationship there are seasons where that relationship come under strain. I know, not with you, Rick. I mean, but as a worship leader, how do you approach seasons like that where there's tension in that relationship?
Yes.
There are mismatched expectations. What do you do as a worship leader? I mean,
do you want to start here? Actually, I was expecting you, Eugene, to come my way. You've asked them.
No.
What do you expect?
He's looking this side, meaning that
It's your turn, Rick.
It's your turn, Rick.
What does a worship pastor expect of a campus leader? Is that where this conversation is going?
Yeah.
Can we take it there?
Go for it.
No, just to, I do want to give you something, just tell you a story of the very first congregation that I found myself in. But before that, I want to land what they've just mentioned in terms of Tops used the word submit. Have we been in a conversation where we talked about the concept of submission and where the English word submission comes from? Has it surfaced
I think it's
anywhere?
a good thing to mention
Yes.
in this context.
Yeah, it's interesting how Ephesians 5 talks about the relationship between a husband and a wife. And where the husband is obviously expected to lead and to take the apostolic covering or the authority as invested in him, and he needs to lead. So he's determining the vision and the mission, of the family. And the wife is then expected to be in submission. Now the word submission, two components, sub meaning under, and very often used in terms of supporting. And then mission. We know what a mission is. We're a family on mission. So if I want to be following the leadership of my campus pastor, I need to be in support of his mission.
Sure.
That's what submission in essence really is. Yeah.
If I can quickly add just on that, I think if we take a biblical example, in King David, one of the ultimate worship leaders that ever lived, and his relationship to Saul.
Ooh. Do you really want to go there?
Enough said. But I mean, he was so submissive to the one, and he never said when he had the opportunity to take leadership. He was anointed as king. And he never took the opportunity when he could take over because of the wrong of Saul, where even his men said, you deserve that. He never said, no, but Saul isn't that bad, because Saul was bad.
Yes.
So I'm not saying all worship campus leaders, don't. I'm just saying, in that moment, he said, who am I to touch the anointed of God?
He didn't take things in his own
So
hands.
God honored him for the respect he had on the position, not on the quality of the person.
Yes.
So I had to learn that you respect even if it's not deserved.
Yeah.
Who God put in position.
Yes.
And God will lift you up. He took David and he appointed him. He never took that for himself. The right timing came when he was really submitted, because even I think, and that it becomes spiritual to me in our relationship with God, there will be times when I pray for stuff that God won't give in the time I want.
Yes.
And I could, if I don't practice on an earthly way, I mean, God says, how do you know if you love God, if you love one another? How can you really honor and respect God if it doesn't always make sense, unless you respect Him for who He is?
Yes.
You know? So this is, for me, a very big maturing thing that every worship leader has to go through.
Right.
To go, I'm going to respect, and I don't even have to debate if that campus leader is right or wrong. It's not mine to debate.
Yes, it's not
As a
mine.
worship leader, you are probably more than once right about a situation if there's a dispute on what should happen. But it's not the demand on a worship leader to be right or wrong in that stage.
Yeah.
To be obedient to God and that call, and to submit what God has put in place. God will work out if anything isn't in place.
Yeah.
Because that's only a few times in those matters that anybody's deeply in the wrong.
Yes.
Many times, in my experience, it is because of relationship misunderstanding. It's not a right and wrong.
Yeah.
It's that we didn't get one another.
Yeah.
And therefore something feels wrong or right.
Yes.
But the moment in my life when relationship was nurtured, there was very few times.
Yes.
There was a moment, I'll never forget it, when after a season of really getting close with my previous campus leader when I was a worship leader, where in a worship time, we had such a sweet moment. When I looked at him, and it was one of those magic times. And he looked at me and he blinked his eye and he gave me a thumbs up. And I knew we were in such a sweet spot
Sure.
of alignment.
Beautiful.
There was nothing better than that. He just did that, you know.
Yeah.
And I realized we reached that place
Yes.
where what I think is a win is what he thinks is a win.
Yes.
And it came of because of I
Wow.
respected him, didn't agree many times. I had to learn to do that.
Yeah.
I think as a worship leader, it's very easy to see the weakness of a campus pastor. And you sometimes feel very like, I saw that. I must do something
And that's
about
not very hard. Anybody can see it.
Anybody can see a
But we
weakness
feel
in
very-
someone.
Oh wow, I have a
No,
different
it's not
opinion.
a very spiritual thing to see weakness in someone, and you have the choice. How do you approach that?
Yes.
Will you cover him? Will you expose
Yes.
him? I'm thinking of Noah's two sons. When he was drunk. I don't know if you experienced that in your campus pastors.
No,
but
no,
anyway,
not recently, no.
but
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Any allegation. Yeah.
But
Continue
one-
with your question.
one of the sons chose to cover his nakedness,
Yes.
his weakness, and one of his sons laughed at him, exposed that.
Yes.
So as a worship
Made a
leader, you
joke.
have you have that responsibility and choice to cover,
Yeah.
to cover weakness. And I think it's again on the thing of honor. No?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know if we're taking it too far, but I want to come back to what you've mentioned, Tops. I think it's in 1 Peter 2 where Peter says, honor the king.
Yes.
So in other words, honor the authority. And I think it's like 2 or 3 years ago, I read a little bit more into that. So when Peter wrote that, it was when, I think it was King Herod Agrippa I. It was in that time when he reigned. And he was a very corrupt leader. He even wanted to kill Peter. But in that time, Peter says, it's like the David Saul story. In that time, Peter says, honor the king. So he didn't say it in a time when things were going very well. It was like he was even after his life, but he still,
Recognized his position and godly
and
authority.
honored the principle as well. So he understood, God's ways of doing things. So we can't get around that thing.
No, we can't.
Sometimes we want to say, but we can't get around that.
I want to, in a sense, just honor the campus pastors that I've been working under. Some of them have really not had an easy journey with me. Because I'm not
True, very true.
Yeah, now it was now your turn to say I can neither confirm nor
Yeah.
deny.
Rick, you are not weird. You're just a limited edition.
I am. Yeah,
You're a limited edition.
With
We
the
love
emphasis
you.
on limited. I was actually the first full-time worship pastor appointed in my denomination. So it was a post for which there was no job description. We didn't have a roadmap. We didn't understand what it necessarily entailed. And by the time I came into Doxa Deo, I had, in a sense, plotted and planned and laid out something of the groundwork for what it means to be a full-time worship pastor. And I had to do that in conjunction with a man who believed in God's calling over my life, but also didn't quite know how to deal with me. And we actually got to a point where we had to decide, are we going to continue with this relationship or are we going to stop it here and walk away? And I was really struggling with this. And I went to God and I said to him, so how do I know what you called me for. And I know that in this relationship, this is never going to happen. So do you want me to step away from this? And it's as if the Lord was saying to me, who do you think I am holding responsible for the well-being of that local church? You or him? And I said, well, it's not me. I'm not the senior pastor. So obviously you're holding him responsible. And he said, okay. So if I'm going to hold him responsible, I'm not going to expect you to step away from this. I'm going to expect you to support him in what I'm holding him responsible for. You are making it difficult for him. I stepped away from that, realizing, okay, I need to in that sense and in that season, I had to step away from what I believed God had called me to do in order to serve, to come into submission to what God had called him to do. Even if the overlap between what God had called him to do and what God had called me to do, even if the overlap was so little that I was experiencing more frustration than fulfillment. And I stepped away. I said to God, okay, I'm putting this mantle down of worship pastor until you say I can take it up again. And from this moment on, I have become that man's servant. I will serve him. Whatever he asks of me, I will do it. I took a lot of flack at a lot of levels as a result of that choice. One of them in my marriage. My wife didn't understand because she knew the nature of God's calling over my life. And she couldn't understand why I was not doing what God had called me to do, and I was doing what this man expected of me. So that took, I had to manage a lot of tension in my marriage, but eventually that relationship, like Tops was saying, that relationship with him became such a good relationship. The congregation flourished. We were going through a boom time. It was an amazing time. And when he was then called to a different congregation and experienced God moving him on, he actually said to me, listen, I want you to join me there. I believe God has put us together and we're a great team, and he wants us to work together in that new environment. I never experienced God saying that to me. I experienced God saying, you stay here and you serve the other man who's coming in to lead, which I did. And then when it was time for me to leave, I joined Alan in what was then Corpus Christi, which became Doxa Deo.
Can I pick up on that, Eugene? Because I want to maybe comment what I think is important for campus pastors in terms of the responsibility towards the worship leader. The invitation was made from that leader to Rick because he chose to serve him. He could have said, listen, this is it. No, you do what you want. But what I experienced in those times when the relationship was very strong is because there's no contention anymore or rivalry in a way. When that trust is there, I think one of the fruit of a beautiful relationship is when the campus leader is really making it his mission to know what's in the heart of the worship leader. Because when the prophetic is moving, it shifts the spiritual atmosphere. So it's so profound that I think the reverse must also be true. It's not for the campus leader to say, thou shalt respect me because I am the most holy of God. No. That is a God-given thing. It's not for you to reinforce it. Like in any marriage, you have to choose to love one another and respect. And I think in that kind of relationship, when the campus leader goes, I want to know what's in your heart. And I want you to have the best support. It feels to me every campus leader has to, and I hope I've done it, I'll find out later. But
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Feedback later. But I have to, on a regular basis, ask the worship leader, what can I do to support you in being the prophetic expression in this campus? Do you need more speakers? Do we need more this? Can we do that? You know, what can we do in your workspace? Is there enough time to be creative? And the moment that happens, I think a worship leader and a campus leader can go, we've got now the mutual respect, and that will be the sign that we're on the right place. There is a school of thought that I've recognized where that conversation is not nurtured, and the campus leaders just want, as a pastor, to make sure that everybody has his heart, and that's the end of it, you know. I think that's very limiting. That's very unbody-like thinking, like spiritual body. The campus leader must realize that in the worship leader, there's something as the prophetic expression so powerful that if that is supported, there will probably be no bigger force in terms of the word going out. And if I think about big churches internationally who's really built strong worship ministries, where the campus leader and the worship leader were in such a beautiful movement of, like you're saying, one leg to the other, where sometimes you would get to know the worship leader long before you even know who the campus leader is. And then years later, that's the one that set up the space. Every time you hear what preceded that, it was a unified, beautiful, respectful, submitting to one another and understanding the godly way of functioning in that ministry that led to that place. So we have to follow what other people have done right. And let it inspire us to get the same things.
When I was a worship leader, I've had that relationship for 12 years. But the first 3-4 years was sort of like a little bit bumpy. But once you get to that sweet spot, it's amazing. It's amazing. And obviously, sorry, Rick, and obviously we must keep in mind, we're not like enemy conscious, but we must keep in mind that you will always try and come to disturb that relationship. So we must watch and pray. Be watchful.
That's so important. I found the first thing that I had to do when it was the toughest was to ask my campus leader, what can I pray for you? That forces you into your well-being as part of my primary spiritual concern. It's very tough to pray for somebody and hate them in the same way. You have to choose to love, otherwise you can't pray for. So you get yourself to pray for, and then your heart will change toward that person. And then things will follow, I think, as a result of that.
Can I just chip in there with, you haven't asked me yet, what does a worship pastor want from
I'm scared to ask that.
Maybe I should leave the conversation. You can speak freely then, Rick.
Do I have permission to speak freely?
Speak freely. Speak freely.
Please answer that, Rick.
Eugene, I love to distill things to what I call the irreducible minimum factor, that without this thing's not going to work, kind of thing, you know? And I asked the Lord, as head of the church, what does He want from His church? Distill that for me into one core component. And He did. He gave me a one-liner. He said, represent me well.
Yes.
As church, our calling is to represent Him well. And obviously, if we want to do that in every facet of society, we need to know what is on His heart for things like marriage, finance, governance, church, whatever it may be. If we want to represent Him well, we need to really get to know Him intimately. And I think that's every campus pastor's desire for his worship leader. Just represent me well. When you're on stage, when you're in public, when you're in relationships with people that I am nurturing in terms of their spiritual growth, just represent me well in that environment. But for me, He turned the tables on me and He asked me, okay, so what do you want from me?
Yes.
And I was lost. I was stumped. How can I tell God what I expect or what I want from Him? And eventually, through trying to find, I distilled it to one question or one desire. I said, I want you to inspire me. I want to live inspired. So if you can inspire me every day of my life, I know I will serve you to the end of my days. And He's doing that. He's really doing that. So in that sense, I would probably want of my campus pastor to inspire me. If you want me to serve you, just keep me inspired.
Yes.
And I must admit that came out of that first season working with Alan when it was just the two of us on staff. We split all the responsibilities, and he was he was preaching and I was leading worship. And I mean, there were times when while he was preaching, I was writing the songs that was like crystallizing his sermon. And when he gave the invitation, I would walk up and I would sing the song of the sermon he had just preached. And a lot of our songs came into being in that kind of season. And it was like that dream come true almost. This man is inspiring me. And what he says stirs me to express myself creatively. And I bring it into this environment and I'm serving his dream as he is keeping me inspired.
Great. This has been an incredible conversation. I think in the life of a worship leader, in the journey of a worship leader, this is maybe the first dominoes that falls, that puts the whole thing into action.
You're right.
Yeah.
If this is not in place, all of the rest gets disrupted.
Yeah.
So I really thank you guys for this amazing opportunity to spend some time with you and to learn from you. And thank you so much.
It's wonderful. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bring my profeet.